I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
I don't feel no ways tired. I come too far.
Are they our only options? Fortunately not. We have the Libertarian candidates, former governors Gary Johnson and Bill Weld. But people don't even know that they're running.
I've never heard of you guys.
What exactly does a Libertarian stand for?
Johnson and Weld will answer that tonight in our Libertarian Town Hall.
And now, John Stossel.
People act as if there are only two choices this election, Republicans and Democrats, but that's not true. There's one other party that's on the ballot in all 50 states, and that's the Libertarians. Tonight, their presidential and vice presidential candidates, Gary Johnson and Bill Weld, will take questions from you at home via social media, from you in the studio audience, and from the street. That's where the first question comes from.
What would you do to create jobs?
Government doesn't create jobs. Private sector does.
So what would you do?
You can count on certainty when it comes to rules and regulations, when it comes to hiring, when it comes to being in business for yourself.
And certainty will bring jobs.
Certainty will bring jobs.
That is true.
Yes.
Small businesses don't need big tax cuts. They just need to know that it's a one-way ratchet and taxes are only going in one direction, down. And if they internalize that, they're going to build that second factory and employ another 15 people.
Yes, sir.
My question is in regard to the collapse of new business formation in the U.S. since the financial crisis of 2008. What policies do you guys have that will foster entrepreneurship and kind of turn the tide around in this about this problem?
Well, the taxes will only go one direction, and that's down, and that rules and regulations will only be better. That's the certainty of regulation.
So I decided when I was governor in Massachusetts, I wanted to emphasize high-wage jobs. So I selected telecom, biotech, and software, which were three high-wage industries. And this is back in the early 90s. The average wage was over $50,000 a person, all in. So I met with the top 50 CEOs once a month. What can I do for you? Is it regulations? Is it a tax credit? Are there permitting issues? And I made sure that everything they said they needed within reason, as long as it wasn't against something else, they got. And they got very happy, and they started opening new offices. And by the end of my first term, if you were a biotech company anywhere in the United States, even if you were in Research Triangle in North Carolina or Illinois or New Jersey, which were the three big competitor states there, you had to have an office in Kendall Square in Cambridge, or you were going to lose out on the information curve as to what was cutting edge in biotech. And employment exploded.
But wait a sec, to go back. Whoa, who are you as governor to decide telecom is where the interest should be? And this sounds like crony capitalism.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit of analysis, John. That's true. That had to go into that to know that this would be a fruitful place to encourage people to expand. If that's industrial policy, make the most of it. But I thought it was job incentivization. And, you know, by the end of my first term, we'd gone from having the highest unemployment rate among the then 11 industrial states to the lowest. So the proof of the pudding was in the eating in that case.
Thank you. I am so pro-free market, but unfortunately the past several years and the shenanigans of Wall Street and banking, I think has cast a shadow over capitalism and is making people very afraid of the word capitalism. And how would you help to support and raise free markets while working to reduce crony capitalism?
Most Americans actually have come to associate crony capitalism and free market as one and the same, when in fact they're opposites. Crony capitalism, pay to play, is when government involves itself in business. We want government out of business. That's a level playing field. That's equal opportunity.
How?
I vetoed a lot of legislation that gave unfair advantage to business as opposed to legislation that could have treated everyone equally.
One of the most depressing things that I've seen recently is both Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts and President Obama saying to small business owners, hey, you got a company here and you think you've created a lot of jobs? You didn't create those jobs. The government created those jobs. I mean, please, gag me with a spoon.
Let's go back to politics for a moment. Governor Johnson, you're polling at around 9% in most polls these days. That the Commission on Presidential Debates insists you must get 15% to be allowed in the debates. You say this is a conspiracy to exclude outsiders?
Well, we're okay with the 15%. We think we'll get to the 15%. The issue for us right now is not appearing on the top line of the polls. If we were to appear on the top line of the polls, I believe we would be at 20% tomorrow. But
where they put Trump or Hillary on top?
Well, they put Trump and Hillary on top, and then 99% of the media reports that top line. They don't report the second or third line.
Well, it's usually 40-40 to 9. I can see why the media do that.
But if they said, tell us, who do you like, Clinton, Johnson, or Trump, as the question, Gary would be at 30% right now. They don't say that. They say,
I say 20, but
they say
that would be right now.
On Facebook, Ian Rogers asked, how do you propose dismantling departments like education, IRS, and so forth? These are huge organizations with hundreds of thousands of employees. Will there be transitional programs to ensure their employment in the private sector?
Well, it's important to point out, we're not running for king, we're not running for dictator, we're running for president and vice president, and there are constitutional limits to that. But we're going to sign off on abolishing anything that comes out of Congress.
The only way to cut spending is to cut spending. You have to have the political will to do it. If you think there's a bunch of sacred cows there, you're never going to get anything done. I mean, I came into office, I furloughed 8,000 state workers out of a workforce of 72,000 my first day in office. I never got a postcard in my 2 terms about where did this indispensable state worker go to. So that was 14% of the state workforce
and that's
on day one.
That's what this questioner is getting at. Would you have just let them go? Or do you need a federal jobs program?
No, the government's too big. The government's too big. I'm sorry.
Audience? On Twitter, a young man recorded this question about regulating Uber and Lyft.
Hi, John. My name is Trey Winslet. I'm 20 years old and I'm voting for the Libertarian ticket this year. My question for the former governors is this. I am a former Austin, Texas resident who saw the detrimental effects of unenforceable fingerprinting legislation which caused Uber and Lyft to leave the city. Like many Austin residents, I relied on those services almost daily to get around. What is your stance on the implementation of fingerprinting legislation for ride-sharing companies, and would you support legislation that removes restrictions on ride-sharing companies?
Absolutely support legislation that would make it easier for the sharing economy to thrive. And I'm talking now about Uber and I'm talking about Airbnb, 2 very entrepreneurial companies that are being excluded in many areas.
What business is this of the federal government, of the president? If Austin wants to pass stupid rules, what do you have to do with it?
Well, maybe nothing. But if Austin wants to do that, that is stupid on Austin's part. But count on us as president and vice president to not put any more impediments in the way of that happening.
We kind of think willing buyers and willing sellers should be able to exchange goods and services without the government telling them that they cannot do so. Okay?
I think.
On Facebook, Don Huffstutler posted, what would you think of a tax code where everyone paid the same price? I don't mean the same percentage. Everyone gets the same government service. Why should anyone pay more or less than anyone else? The same amount of meat costs the same, whether purchased by a rich or poor person. Why should government be different?
If I could wave that magic wand, I am proposing to replace income tax and corporate tax with a consumption tax, which I think fits that bill.
Shouldn't rich people, I do well, shouldn't I pay a little more than someone who's struggling?
And what I'm going to suggest is, as someone who has more money, you are going to buy more things, and so you will pay more tax.
A last question from Times Square.
How would you get anything done with Congress to stop the gridlock going on in D.C.?
Look, we elect Clinton or Trump, it's going to be more polarized than ever. Okay, that's a given. Nobody believes anything but that. So suppose you have a couple of libertarians, former Republican governors, having served in heavily Democrat states, gotten reelected by big margins in the middle with a bipartisan administration. Democrats, Republicans, libertarians, everybody libertarian leaning, calling out both sides to come to the middle to address the issues that we do have. I think you can make a case that that third scenario might actually work out.
No, it could be a long, cool drink of water. I mean, I think the members of Congress, half of them in each case, would be delighted not to have somebody in the White House screaming at them for being stupid and not understanding why the latest proposal was the perfect solution. You know, we've promised no more sanctimonious self-serving speeches out of the White House, no more buffoonery and bragging and bullying out of the White House. You can guess which is which. But.
And for the record, on this show, we support gridlock because we think they do less damage that way. Please stick around. Gary Johnson, Bill Weld, we've got a whole hour of town hall with your questions for the Libertarian presidential candidate. We're back with our Libertarian Town Hall. Governors Gary Johnson and Bill Weld will now take your questions on social issues. For example,
How are you going to legalize marijuana in all its forms? Cannabis, the plant, indica, sativa, and hemp. How are you going to do it?
How are you going to do it?
Well, it's going to be a state's issue. But first day in office, we deschedule marijuana as a Class 1 narcotic, which opens up a whole vast research and development that can go along with the marijuana industry, and also frees up banking in those states where it is legal.
Let's broaden it to other drugs. On Facebook, Michael Cope asked it this way. How do you plan to end the war on drugs? Legalization or decriminalization? And would you do it for other drugs?
Well, since 1999, I've advocated only the legalization of marijuana, believing when we do that as a country, and I believe we are going to do that as a country, then we will focus on drugs first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue.
On to another touchy, a newer social issue. On Facebook, Brendan Rush asks, why should a private business owner be forced by government to serve a customer? A store can choose not to serve a customer who has no shoes and no shirt, but a person who's a Christian has to bake a cake for someone whom he disagrees with? Johnson will claim similarities to Jim Crow, but there's no similarity. The customer is free to take their business elsewhere. Will Johnson force the Muslim deli owner to sell pork to Christians? I think not.
I think that supporting discrimination is the wrong thing to do, and I think that the legislation that...
You would force the Muslim to sell pork?
By force, that no one would be allowed to discriminate on the basis of religion. Utah has passed some really significant ideal legislation that allows for religious freedom, but it has very clearly staked out the fact that there will be no discrimination against the LGBT community, which I think has been really targeted.
So the Utah statute, for example, says that a church can do anything it wants to as a church. It's in the business of being a church.
All right,
okay?
what about the business, though?
But if the private merchant wants to discriminate on the grounds of race or religion, those are way suspect categories.
The Muslim entrepreneur must sell pork to people.
I think that if we pass the legislation, well, you're talking about potentially opening up discrimination, in my opinion, that maybe businesses in this country discriminate, quarter of the businesses in this country discriminate against Muslims because let's just be safe.
That might happen,
nobody
but
has
then
to
other
sell
businesses
pork
would
if they
serve
don't want
Muslims.
You're talking about a situation that really doesn't exist, meaning you have to sell the cake to the individual that wants to buy the cake. You don't have to decorate the cake the way the individual wants to. That's First Amendment. And if that's legislation, John, that needs signing, I'll be glad to sign that legislation. We don't want to be any part of that kind of discrimination of any kind.
This Facebook user posts this question for Governor Weld. I heard an interview where you cited Justice Stephen Breyer as a good Supreme Court justice, and you would seek advice from Susan Collins and Russ Feingold on future appointments. None of them are considered defenders of liberty or constitutionalists. Your selections are those least likely to defend the Constitution.
Well, I think they're all good people. They're centrists. I was making the point that I wouldn't necessarily go out and find the most wacko liberal or wacko conservative person that I could in order to appoint them to the Supreme Court to further a specific political agenda.
Russ Feingold is a centrist?
Russ Feingold is a smart guy. I've known him since he was in law school. He's a smart guy. Boy, did I get in trouble for that, though, because there's a Libertarian in Wisconsin, and I heard about that one, and I'm sorry. But no, I know them all well, and I think they're fine, intelligent people.
Yes, ma'am.
I am very concerned about how many people are in prison. I visit prison frequently. I am shocked at how many women are in prison. I am shocked when I see elderly women in prison.
But
I don't
your
understand.
question, ma'am.
My question is, will you encourage governors of all the states to maybe grant more clemencies to the elderly that are in prison?
Yes. Compassion, giving judges discretion. The profile of the majority category in federal prison today is the person who's been arrested on numerous times for selling small amounts of drugs. That's the major category of prisoner in federal prison today.
Aaron Brown asked this question on Facebook. Why should I, an evangelical Christian, vote for you?
That hypocrisy is the unforgivable. Doing one thing, saying one thing, and doing another. And neither of us are hypocrites. Being honest, telling the truth. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. That's what you can count on. Transparency, the truth, no hypocrisy.
Coming up next, are you two isolationists, politicians who would leave America less safe? And other questions for the Libertarian presidential and vice presidential candidate. We're back with our special town hall with the Libertarian presidential and vice presidential candidates. With school starting, many people had questions about our broken education system.
What are the changes you would make to the educational system?
How would you improve the quality of education for all Americans?
We would abolish the Federal Department of Education. When the state of New York ends up sending money to Washington, and by the time it comes back from Washington with all of the caveats associated with how should you conduct education in New York State, really, it's a diminishment of about 6% of those educational resources that could have been in New York's hands to begin with. More money for education is eliminating the Federal Department of Education.
And we need more school choice and more charter schools and more opportunity for those kids and their parents to escape from those school systems, to put pressure on the school systems to shape up or ship out. And after those took effect, 3 years after I left, Massachusetts ranked #1 in reading and math every year since then. So, you know, it was an end to social promotion, where you get to the end of high school, and even if you don't show competency in reading and writing, you get promoted, because otherwise it would be discriminatory not to graduate you from high school. That's not doing the student any favors at all. So I think you need to be hard-headed there. Education is a place where we need conservative, hard-headed approaches.
And choice, leaving it to the states, leaving it to
leaving it to
individual
the
schools
states.
to compete.
As governor of New Mexico, I was more outspoken than any other governor in the country regarding school choice, that we needed to open up competition to public education.
This freedom creates other problems. On Facebook, Trey Price asks, one of your policy ideas involves devolving the Department of Education, putting education under the control of the local government and parents. But where I went to school, if that were to happen, the most likely result is that some groups would pressure the schools to stop teaching evolution in favor of creationism, and there'd be other attacks on science. So you just let them?
Well, I guess you're back to the lunch counter now. You got a one way one side and one way the other side. Look, federal government exists to enforce the Constitution, the law of the land. And leaving choices to individual states, I think we're going to always come down on the side of that, unless, of course, those end up to be constitutional violations.
On Facebook, Ian Moffat asks, what's your solution to the student debt crisis? I read you'd think student loans should be cut, and as a libertarian and someone who realizes financial aid is the reason for higher tuition, I agree, but is that all you'll support? Any reforms to actually help students like me pay for the hyperinflated cost of college?
Well, one thing I think we need is more online education, distance education, as opposed to the most expensive model, which is the 4-year bricks-and-mortar Ivy-clad institution.
Am I just unrealistic? I keep waiting for a libertarian politician to answer a question like that. What are you going to do to help me with my student debt? And say, nothing. I can't make up your bad mistakes.
We did that on job creation. Well, at least Gary did.
Well, students have been sold a bill of goods. The reason for the high cost of college tuition is guaranteed government student loans. So government has stacked the deck from the very beginning.
Audience, yes, sir.
For students who already have taken out student loans, what would you do to address the ballooning debt without placing the burden on the backs of the taxpayers?
Well, I got to take a dig at John for starters, and that is, looking for the libertarian solutions. Look, we've been dealt a hand here that's unfair by government. So taking that into account, can we not cap those interest rates?
But that costs the taxpayer money.
It does.
But more online education doesn't burden the taxpayers. School choice in charter schools doesn't burden the taxpayers. More jobs available through partnerships with the private sector doesn't burden the taxpayers.
Yes, go ahead.
Governor Weld, you mentioned distance learning as an option for higher ed. Would you also be in favor of distance learning or homeschooling, online education as an option for parents for K through 12 education as well?
Oh, sure. All for homeschooling, all for distance learning online. Yep.
But we firmly
believe...
believe...
Power to parents. It doesn't take a village to raise a child. Takes parents.
If you empower 50 states to do this, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, those are going to end up being best practices that will get emulated. Of course, there'll be horrible failure, which will be sticking with the status quo, and that'll be avoided.
But, even charter schools have to have freedom to fail.
And when there's freedom to fail, then the good schools thrive and teach more kids.
Right. And people learn things.
Coming up, questions from you about war. And are you guys soft on defense?
I'm voting for Donald Trump because he's going to protect our country. He's going to build that wall. What are you guys going to do to protect our country?
Plus, governors, you have this problem. So many people don't know who you are. When we showed these pictures to people, most people said, who?
Do you recognize this man?
No.
No.
I don't know.
No, I don't.
We're back with our Libertarian Town Hall with Governors Gary Johnson and Bill Weld. We libertarians want to limit government, but even libertarians agree one thing government should do is provide for the common defense. Some Americans fear libertarians won't do that.
I'm voting for Donald Trump because he's going to protect our country. He's going to build that wall. What are you guys going to do to protect our country?
What are you going to do?
So We are the only ticket that's not isolationist in this year's race. The two other tickets have they've turned their backs on free trade, which has been the cornerstone of America's supremacy in the world since the Second World War. And we, as a party and as individuals, believe that the cornerstone of U.S. Foreign and military policy has to be military supremacy, demonstrated supremacy in both naval and air power. People all over the world pay attention to that, and that's got to come first. Well, you want to cut it 20%. That's not to say we're not going to have supremacy in air and naval power. We may not want to have 400,000 boots on the ground fighting 4 wars simultaneously or regime change. When it comes to, regime change and American blood on foreign soil and boots on the ground in foreign countries, no, we would be a little bit more, quite a bit more skeptical and restrained than certain other candidates in the race.
And the questioner said, Trump's going to keep me safe by building a wall.
Wall's about the craziest thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Why? People are upset that people are crossing the border, that some of them are committing crimes.
Well, statistically, they're committing less crime than U.S. citizens, and they're not taking jobs that U.S. citizens want. We should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to be able to get a work visa. And a work visa should entail a background check and a Social Security card that taxes get paid.
On Facebook, Eric Christian says smaller, more focused ISIS-style terrorist attacks are becoming more common. How do you propose to defend the U.S. from these types of violence?
Well, these are ISIS-inspired attacks. And look, we involve ourselves in regime change that in my lifetime, I cannot think of one single instance where our supporting a regime change has resulted in things being better and not worse.
For the
audience, you have questions? Go ahead. Don't steal. Government doesn't like the competition.
My question is, will you cut all foreign aid, including aid to Israel, and treat everyone equally and fairly around the world?
I think that, yes, we philosophically, why are we building roads, schools, bridges, and hospitals in other parts of the world when we have those same needs here today?
Having said that, you mentioned Israel. I have a long record with Israel. They are a vibrant democracy in a very sensitive, politically sensitive area of the world. So it'd be a cold day in July before I would totally freeze them out.
So you guys don't agree on this?
Oh, no, I think that we have come to believe that foreign aid is about food and medicine, when foreign aid really, for the most part, just props up foreign dictatorships and ends up being anything but.
Who's next here? Yeah.
I believe regime change and regime change worked in Germany, it has worked in Japan, and it worked in Iraq until Obama pulled out. Why not support boots on the ground when the U.S. Assets are essentially at stake?
Germany and Japan, we kind of got attacked, right? So there would be boots on the ground there.
If we get attacked.
Yeah, this was us having been attacked. I mean, big difference here, as opposed to...
Think Iraq, think Syria, think Libya. Those were not successful regime change operations.
That's because Obama pulled out and we were attacked by Islamofascism, essentially.
You don't believe that because we got involved in Iraq, that's why we're now dealing with Iran, and that Al-Qaeda then fled and, in essence, became ISIS in Syria and Libya, that was a consequence of regime change in Iraq, and that getting involved in regime change in those two countries have also led to the arming of ISIS, not intentionally, but it's what has happened.
Incursions like that can have unforeseen consequences, moral as well as economic.
As bad as these situations are, our interventions have resulted in something that at best is the same and oftentimes is worse.
Gentlemen, yes?
Hi. Hello, governors. Do you believe in blowback and
what do you want to do as Commander-in-Chief to enforce an era of peace and non-aggression across the world?
Absolutely believe in blowback, and the fact that we are flying these drone strikes and arguably killing thousands of innocent people that have resulted in a situation being worse, not better. Now, do you rule out drone strikes completely? I don't think that you. I don't think that you do that. Not to discount potential use to actually address the enemy, but for the most part, I just think this is blowback.
Next, isn't voting Libertarian wasting your vote? Now more of our Libertarian Town Hall. Here's something lots of people ask Libertarians.
Am I wasting my vote voting for a Libertarian candidate when voting Republican or Democrat seems like a more sure bet to win?
It does, frankly. And Donnie would pose, why are you trying to split the conservative vote, knowing it only strengthens Hillary?
Look, a wasted vote is voting for somebody you don't believe in. That's a wasted vote.
But if you agree with us, we're fiscally responsible, we're socially inclusive and tolerant. If you agree with us and you want to go waste your vote on Trump or Clinton, be our guest. We're libertarians.
And to be clear, they say you're going to help elect Hillary, but in the polls, you're pulling roughly equally from Democrats.
Look, what's going on here is that the two parties have a monopoly. They created the Commission on Debates. They exist for no other purpose now than to try to kill each other and perpetuate their own duopoly in Washington. And they're frankly trying to brainwash people into thinking you have to be an R or a D because that's what mommy and daddy always did. And it's simply not true. And you have two candidates who we're running against. We're going to be the third ticket, and they do not have our set of views. The Republican Party is not socially inclusive and welcoming. Quite to the contrary, they tried to make their platform meaner than it was before the convention. The Democrats are going to spend money like water, so we've got a 6-lane highway right up the middle. We're two-term Republican governors in blue states, and we got stuff done and balanced the budget, and that's what's needed in Washington. And we're not saying trust us, we're saying we've already done it, and that's going to be a winning argument.
Yes, who's next here?
My question is basically, all my friends that are Democrats my age are not voting because Hillary Clinton is the nominee. I have a lot of friends who are Republican who are not voting because of Donald Trump. How do you make young people in America believe in democracy and voting again?
I think we sell ourselves. It's just that 70% of Americans don't even know who we are.
And I think we're the natural ticket, the natural candidate specifically for young people. The emphasis on freedom and liberty doesn't hurt us at all with them. But they basically know you can't, go on forever spending money that you don't have. And I think this millennial generation is going to turn the country this election cycle.
Tasha Moore, who has this question for you. What can you say to assure us you are, in fact, libertarian at heart? Because I'm just not believing it.
Oh, Tasha, come on.
And you...
Come on.
You're just another white-bread liberal Republican.
Hey, let's not forget that, that the Libertarian Party did make us their nominees, all right? It was a contested race. And
all right, well, Tasha seems to believe it about you, but not about your running mate.
Well, Bill and I both have self-identified as libertarian, myself, going back to about 1971.
My papers in law school were written about Friedrich Hayek, who's quite well known in these in my first press conference as governor, I greeted the members of the Fourth Estate by saying, "Fellow libertarians, welcome to room 156.
Really?
And there was nervous laughter in the room because they knew I wasn't joking.
On Twitter, Key's mom asks, Stossel, why are they parading as progressives, pandering to Black Lives Matter, Muslims, abortionists, and so forth?
Well, you know, I have a dog in the fight on that Black Lives Matter issue. They came out and they said, do Black Lives Matter? And the Trump folks said, all lives matter. And the correct answer to the question, do Black Lives Matter, is not all lives matter. It's yes.
And what do you say to this person who says you're coming out like progressives? And the Republicans who are part of my social media fan base, they're angry at your liberal positions.
There's probably isn't anything I can say to that criticism that would change his mind.
But it's like me meeting with the industry heads. If we can be, you know, assertive and without spending taxpayer money, try to improve the lot of citizens and increase, you know, the number of good jobs out there, you know, you call that progressive? Okay, but I mean, that's our job. That's our job in office.
One last one for this block. J.P. Finney tweeted this question. Stossel, does Gary Johnson believe he's able to effectively debate Trump and Clinton? His stage presence lacks command.
Oh, man.
But I think that's what the tweeter means here.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll take
Governor
it.
Weld has more command.
I'll take it over bullying and braggadocio and sanctimonious speeches, that's for sure.
Audience, what do you think? Does he lack command?
No. He's a normal guy.
He's a normal guy, okay. When we return, glimmers of hope.
Oh yeah, that's Gary Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm kind of interested in him. The other candidates for Republicans and Democrats are kind of bumming me out.
My mind's made up. I'm not neutral. I'm going to vote for these guys. They are a much better choice than Trump or Clinton. But what chance do you have when you can't get into the debate? And two recent polls found most Americans haven't even heard of you. We had your pictures blown up, and producer Naomi Rockwell showed these things to people around New York.
Do you recognize this man?
No.
No.
I don't know.
No, I don't.
I can't say no, I've never seen that face.
Although that's quite a curious face.
A few people had a clue.
Oh yeah, that's Gary Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
A few people recognized Bill Weld.
Is he the vice presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party?
And once Brockwell told people what the Libertarians stand for, they were more positive.
I'm kind of interested in him. The other candidates for Republicans and Democrats are kind of bumming me out.
Me too. But, governors, how do you possibly compete when people don't know who you are?
Well, the first presidential debate is projected to have more viewership than the Super Bowl. So there's no chance of us winning without being in that game. But we believe that we are going to be in that
Why are you so confident? You're 5 points away.
Because 70% of the people in the country don't know who Gary is. We're going to be out there spending a lot of money between now and 30 days from now to increase our name recognition.
30 days is enough.
Yeah. I mean, this stuff feeds on itself. I mean, I see it in fundraising. It's picked up geometrically, not arithmetically. And there's just much more buzz. Gary's getting mobbed in airports he wasn't before. And I'll tell you this, on the day that it's announced that we're going to be in the debates, which is not going to be the end of September, it'll probably be first or second week in September, on that day, we will have saturation media coverage for the entire balance of the election season. That'd be worth $1 billion. So by the time the debates come around, Gary's going to have 100% name rec, just like the other two, and the artificial advantage will have disappeared.
All right, so here's your last chance tonight. What would you say to America to convince people that you're viable competitors, better than the other two?
I think that philosophically we speak for the majority of Americans. We're fiscally conservative, we're socially inclusive, and we really question these military interventions that have made things worse, not better. We believe in free trade. We believe in diplomacy. And if you want to think that anything is going to change with Trump or Clinton, guess again. How about two former Republican governors, not off the street, but two former Republican governors serving in blue states, re-elected? We've been there. We've done that. This is something that we can do and have done. We don't have to prove anything.
And Governor Weld, your last statement tonight?
My last statement is, I can't improve on that. Gary, you're the man.
We had more questions. Supportive audience, we had more questions and answers than we had time for tonight. We just posted that on the web at johnstossel.com. You can hear more from the Libertarian presidential and vice presidential candidates. Thank you, governors. Gary Johnson, Bill Weld. I don't agree with everything you say, but both of you would make a better president than Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And, of course, after tonight's show, more people will realize that. And so you'll be allowed in the debates. And then when America hears your libertarian ideas and realizes they're much better than repression from Hillary and Donald, you'll be elected. So President Johnson, Vice President Weld.
After tonight. 17% after tonight. Thank you, John.
Mr. President, good night.